Greetings to everyone. This is our study group on Spiritist psychology. And the topic that we're going to study tonight is structure and dynamics of the psyche. And I'd like to hand it over to Anahy.
Hello, everybody. Good night for all. So I just want to point out that this is a collaborative study group. We are going to be exchanging thoughts. I will have the PowerPoint now. Let's see, just share with you. And okay, we are going to record until the end of the PowerPoint, and then we will stop the recording and be talking and exchanging ideas. So let me just share here. Is that everything okay, Fabrizio?
Yep, we can see perfectly.
Okay. So we are going to be talking, it's actually an introduction about the structure and dynamics of the psyche. Very interesting topic. So in Memories, Dreams, Reflections is Jung's autobiography. He says in the, he starts saying this: my life is a story of the self-realization of the unconscious. Everything in the unconscious seeks outward manifestation, and the personality too desires to evolve out of its unconscious conditions and to experience itself as a whole. I cannot employ the language of science.
Just 1 second.
We have somebody. It's a nice voice. It's a child. Maybe it's a synchronicity. So I think I would like you to all pay attention to this sentence. Everything in the unconscious seeks outward manifestation, and the personality too desires to evolve out of its unconscious conditions and to experience itself as a whole. I cannot employ the language of science to trace this process of growth in myself, for I cannot experience myself as a scientific problem. What we are to our inward vision and what man appears to be sub specie eternitatis, that which means under the form of eternity, can only be expressed by way of myth. Myth is more individual and expresses life more precisely than the science. Science works with concepts of averages which are far too general to do justice to the subjective variety of an individual life. Thus, it is that I have now undertaken in my 83rd year to tell my personal myth. I can only make direct statements, only tell stories. Whether or not the stories are true is not the problem. The only question is whether what I tell is my fable, my truth. So I brought to you some images from, this is, I don't know if I can, you can see here the Jung's house in Zurich. And here on top of the door, this is his study, on top of the door, there is an inscription in Latin, vocatus attac non vocatus, Deus aderet, which means called or not called, God will be present. So Jung got this sentence from one of Erasmus de Rotterdam's writings, and it goes back to the Delphi oracle in ancient Greece, where people went in search for answers from the god Apollo. In a certain way, not that he would like it, I think. Maybe Lionel can tell us later. But we could say that Jung was kind of an oracle himself of the psyche, bringing us many new approaches to its study. So the study of the psyche and information about the structure and dynamics of this amazing and still much unexplored inner world. So these are some images from Zurich and Lake Zurich. And here the Bollingen Tower, a tower that Jung built by the lake. It's a beautiful image. This is Jung by the lake. And just it reminded me that one of Jung's grandsons said that his grandfather was a sailor. We used to think that he's a very unusual one. Because in addition to navigating the waters of the Zurich Lake, which he did constantly, reading out loud Homer's Odyssey, he took a deep dive into the waters of the unconscious, bringing to us much needed knowledge. So here are some images, Jung's mother and father, Jung as a child, and Emma Jung and Jung as, youngsters when they met. And this is the Burgosli Psychiatry Hospital, the biggest in Switzerland at that point, where Jung worked as a young psychiatrist. And this is a very well-known image of Jung and Freud with Ferenczi. And when they went to Worcester in United States in 1909 to give some lectures and talk about psychoanalysis. So Jung says that, oh, sorry, just go back. So an autobiography, Fabrizio, can you help me? Because in the beginning, I cannot see the first line.
Yeah.
Do you want me
because
to
of
read
the,
it?
are you listening?
Do you want me to read it, Fabrizio?
Sorry, Fabrizio?
Yeah, I can read it. That's okay. An autobiography is so difficult to write because we possess no standards, no objective foundation from which to judge ourselves. I know that in many things,
Sorry, it's a delay in the internet. Can you read the first sentence to me, please?
An autobiography is so difficult to write.
Thank you. Because we possess no standards, no objective foundation from which to judge ourselves. I know that in many things I am not like others, but I do not know what I really am like. I am a man, but what is it to be that? Like every other being, I am a splinter of the infinite deity, but I cannot contrast myself with any animal, any plant, or any stone. Only a mythical being has a range greater than man's. How then can a man form any definite opinions about himself, he wonders. I will ask you to read again the first sentence because it's too up.
Okay. We are a psychic process which we do not
control. So we are reading together, see, that's collaborative work, or only partially direct. Consequently, we cannot have any final judgment about ourselves or our lives. Life has always seemed to me like a plant that lives on its rhizome. So So its true life is invisible, hidden in the rhizome. The part that appears above ground lasts only a single summer, yet I have never lost a sense of something that lives and endures beneath the eternal flux. What we see is blossom, which passes. The rhizome remains. So this is very important knowledge that Jung is bringing about, you know, what are we, what is man, what are we doing here, which part of us is visible and which is invisible and is hidden. So we are going to be back there in our discussion, but now I bring to you a little of Joanna de Angelis. It's in the book Life, Challenges and Solutions, and it's chapter 4. And when she talks about life energies. So this is all Joanna de Angelis. So she's talking about mental habits. And she says, biological life in itself is the result of automatisms, functioning in harmony as long as the organic equipment is in order. Obeying the heart rate and brain reactions, all phenomena appear repetitive, predictable within ancestral atavisms. So this is all Joanna's talking, okay? So this is these are some stages of development that I brought to you reading Joanna. It came back into my mind. And it's the stages of the embryo evolution, okay, in the mother's womb. So you can see there is, let me go back. So Joanna is saying biological life in itself is the result of automatisms, functioning in harmony as long as the organic equipment is in order. Obeying the heart rate and brain reactions, all phenomena appear repetitive, predictable within ancestral atavisms. Okay, so you see, one of the things that we think while we are, you know, like a reptile in the embryo developing in the mother's womb, you see, the different stages, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, coming from fertilized egg, you know, when it's splitting, to the 9-month baby. So I remember saying, when the first thought about that, listening to Dr. Marlene Nobre, that she was one of the founders of the Medical Spiritist Association here in Brazil. And the first time, and I'd never thought about that exactly like this, but I remember she telling us, see how the ontogeny, recapitulates phylogeny, okay? So which means ontogeny, we know that it's the development of our own organism, okay? So the development of our organism repeats our evolutionary history as a species, our phylogeny, right? Because we know Darwin, everybody knows Darwin's theory. So life develops on Earth. We say that we have a reptile brain that is the basis of the brain, the part of the brain that it's in the basis. We call some neurologists call the reptile brain, the instinctive part, you know. So this is very important, I think, to understand what Joanna de Angelis is saying. There are atavisms within ourselves, okay, within our consciousness. So this is the baby in mother's womb. So imagine the complexity and how just happens within our bodies, okay? And the brain, and of course the heart. It's beautiful when we study anatomy, the ones that are from the medical field or the health professionals. So Joanna says that subjected to mesological factors, okay, the relationship between the environmental factors and the beings. So subjected to mesological factors, such as food nutrients, for instance, in the first period of physical existence, it passes without alterations, marching inexorably towards the fatality of its development. So the baby learning how to walk, you know, is one of other examples. Mental life, Joanna says, begins with glimpses and perceptions as the spirit, so this pay very much attention at this point, as the spirit takes over the equipment of the brain, which decodes the waves of thought. So for Joanna, it's very important that we understand that our consciousness is our spirit, okay? So it's part of our spirit. So mental life begins with glimpses and perceptions as the spirit takes over the equipment of the brain. The spirit is using the brain, not the brain is producing the mind. The spirit, the higher consciousness, is using the brain, which decodes the waves of thought. So the brain will decode the waves of thought. From the initial instinctual impulses to cosmic understanding, don't we want to get there, to the cosmic understanding, and a wide experience, it opens the doors of communication to logical reasoning before reaching the superior stage, which is the identification with the divine consciousness. So she's telling us the evolution of the spirit, okay, of our higher consciousness. And she says that the spirit here incarnated takes over the equipment of the brain to decode, and the brain decodes the waves of thought. And so from the initial instinctual impulses to going there where we want to go, to cosmic understanding and a wide experience, it opens the doors. So the spirit little by little opens the door of communication to logical reasoning, what we are doing right now. Before, so we are in one stage of evolution of the logical reasoning, but before we get to the point of reaching the superior stage, which is the identification with the divine consciousness. Okay, the human being victorious in the previous stages through which he has passed. So we are talking about reincarnations, many lives, many learnings. When reaching the moment of reason, also brings the mental habits ingrained in the reflexes of the fixations of intellectual learning. They are the ones who start directing his conduct, because all existential programming begins in the thought for Joanna, okay? So all those atavisms that we are saying for Joanna is in the thought, but and this existential programming that helps us to evolve in many different ways. From the beginning, when we reincarnate and our body is growing and our mind is developing to intellectual reasoning and learning, right, to different stages through that cosmic perfection. Well, it is going to be a perfection but to the cosmic thinking. So they are the ones, right? This mental habits ingrained in the reflexes of the fixations of intellectual learning. They are the ones who start directing his conduct, because all existential programming begins in the thought for Joanna. In the thought are the orders of what should be done and how to carry them out. As a result of previous experiences, thoughts of pain, anguish, pessimism were more deeply marked due to their unbalancing force. We are talking about the spirit, okay? It is these unconscious evocations that first attack the mental home when we reincarnate of the individual in his daily life. Linked to the repetitive mechanisms of suffering behaviors, he maintains tendencies towards masochism, cultivating, without realizing it, the mental habits that generate conflict and suffering. Okay. So I brought to you a small, I don't know if I told this before, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I don't think here I have told this. It's a very, it's an Eastern tale, very quick, that it's a man is on the side of the road. Always when I think about habits, I remember this story. A man is on the side of the road. Suddenly, a rider passes at great speed. The man asks, "Where are you going at such speed?" The rider answers, "I don't know, ask the horse." I don't think I have told you this small story. So the horse can be our habits. Okay, so I remember this when I was reading again Joanna's chapter. So allowing oneself to be led by primitive, habitual manifestations, the labors that keep the being in the stage in which it finds itself are repeated without positive results, without the moral value to reach new levels of the process of evolution. If we allow ourselves to be led by primitive, habitual manifestations. Since thought is the guideline for conduct, thinking correctly must be the great challenge for anyone who aspires triumph, for Joanna. Then we can think of the Buddhists, right, that have the octuple pathway, the right thinking, the right saying, etc. So it is up to individual to insist and persevere, opening new space in the addicted mental field, planting new seeds of optimism and hope in order to get out of the sick state. It is essential to start valuing everything around you, establishing new standards of understanding, thus freeing yourself from negative pessimistic constructions. The new habit will slowly implant itself in the subconscious until it becomes an integral part of the behavior. We can exchange some ideas about this with Lionel and other health professionals that, for instance, do psychotherapy, because it's one of the principles of psychotherapy, you know, some kind of, but all of psychotherapists try to bring this habits, this unconscious stuff to consciousness so that we can establish new standards of understanding. Then Joanna goes on, good or bad thinking for her is a matter of habit. You can think about that later on. Every time an unhealthy, perverse, malicious, unjust thought occurs, we should immediately replace it with a dignified, healthy, loving, trusting, fair one, sustaining it with the wave of irradiation of the desire that it be fulfilled. So you see how Joanna talks about mental stuff, but also at the same time about spiritual. She uses spiritual language also, because when we talk about wave of irradiation, so we are talking about the ability of the spirit to irradiate a wave, okay, an energy of the desire that, to sustain this better or healthier way of thinking, dignified, healthy, loving, trusting, and that this desire should be fulfilled by us. So she goes on saying that what we think becomes reality. This is why thinking and acting are terms, for Joanna, of the same existential equation. And so she says, first think, then act. Sometimes it's very hard, and we are going to be learning together why, okay, with Jung, some of Jung's concepts and structures of the psyche. So the superior mental constructions for Joanna, which produce healthy habits, are renewed and grow in the being, originating from the spirit that captures them from the divine thoughts, from where all the forces of edification and total realization derive. I'm thinking now about one of Lionel's books, but I don't want to give people spoilers about the transpersonal dimension of the psyche when he talks about that, just so he can have in his mind if he can make some connections about this sentence that Joanna de Angelis says, and about the collective unconscious or the transpersonal dimension of the unconscious. The superior mental constructions which produce healthy habits are renewed and grow in the being, originating from the spirit that captures them from the divine thought, from where all the forces of edification and total realization derive. So the psychologically healthy man or woman does not live on memories, nor is she or he tormented by aspirations. As thought is the source that generates aspirations for Joanna, yearning for the best and working to acquire it represents elevation and moral development. Not getting upset, she says, however, when this does not happen, is a demonstration of maturity and balance. So coming to the end, more or less, so this is all the introduction, so we could think about a little of what Jung was saying about himself, using Jung's psyche as and story as an example, and what Joanna is talking about mental habits. So for Jungian psychology, the personality as a whole is called psyche, as a Greek word that originally means spirit or soul in ancient Greece, and later came to mean mind. And in the psyche, we include all thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, both those that we perceive as conscious, as well as those that are unconscious, in a very simple way, okay? This concept of the psyche represents Jung's early idea that a person is primarily a whole. What man has to do during his existence is to develop this essential whole until he reaches the highest possible degree of coherence, differentiation, and harmony. Otherwise, man can break up into separate, autonomous, and conflicting systems, and a dissociated personality is an unhealthy personality. So in the model thought by Jung, the psyche would be composed of several concentric spheres. We can think about that, like an onion, for example. The most superficial layer would represent consciousness, while the other scales would be the deepest levels of the unconscious until we would reach the center. Among all these layers, there would be a constant interaction. So this we can find in the internet. It's this author, Peter Freeman, in 2014. I thought it was a good map, let's say, a diagram. So, and we are going to be seeing, okay, because we're going to be talking about all these concepts. But so different layers, and this is the ego, okay, and consciousness, we could say the outside layer, and the persona, that is kind of conscious. We are going to be talking about one of the complexes related to the ego. And then in the personal unconscious, the shadow, another complex, it's kind of opposite to the persona. And then the center, the self. It's a beautiful concept, one of, it's a Jung self. There are other authors that talk about self, but this is Jung concept of the self. Deep within the collective unconscious and the archetypal level, okay? But you see that it's borders the personal unconscious because there is the ego self-axis. We are going to be talking about all of these concepts in our course. And this is a much simpler diagram that it's, okay, we have the consciousness, the outside layer, the personal unconscious, and the collective unconscious. Looking very small, but I don't think that it's kind of correct, the size of the thing, but we are going to be seeing all of this and discussing all of this later. So in the collective works, Jung says consciousness is a surface of shift covering the vast unconscious area, the extent of which is unknown. Okay, it's unknown, the extension of the unconscious. That's why it's so much bigger. So we restrict ourselves to the perception of instants of existence. It's like looking through a crack and only seeing a single moment of existence. It is difficult to us to have, a consciousness is like a continuous, that I know everything about myself from yesterday, from 2 days, from 1 week. It's a split, okay? So we have difficulty establishing an image of wholeness due to the very limitation of consciousness. So let's be humble, people. Our consciousness is still limited, okay? So for Jung, the area of the unconscious is immense and continuous, but the area of consciousness is a restricted field of momentary vision. So just to remind us that the word consciousness comes from the Latin conscius, which means to know with other, to participate in knowledge, or just to know later on. So consciousness is the only part of the psyche known directly by the individual, forming from the unconscious, according to Jung. It appears early in life, probably before birth, and changes throughout life. The beginning of consciousness is also the beginning of individuation, a concept, a beautiful concept that we are going to be learning later on the course. It is the point of orientation and perception of the external world. Okay, so we need our consciousness to orient ourselves and have this perception of the external world. And I brought to you this, I love many sentences, Jung's sentence, brought to you this sentence where Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. and you will call it fate. I think this is very important. And keep in mind this sentence, because it's one of, I think, Joanna's main objective. And also, of course, Jung's, his development of analytical psychology that we call depth psychology, to bring the deep unconscious, not only our personal unconscious, but the deep unconscious as much as we can, to have this talk with our depths, our inner being, okay? So that I don't give too much spoilers, but to have this talk, to make the unconscious conscious as much as we can, because then we are directing our life, and we are not subjected to what we call fate, okay? So I think I can stop the sharing. And I hope I didn't take too long, because I very much want to listen to Lionel, some of his ideas, and to everybody else. And I do invite everybody who is listening to this recording afterwards to join us in the next meeting, so we can debate and exchange ideas together, okay, if possible and when possible. So I should say bye-bye to people that are listening to the recording. Fabrice, you want to say something?
Are we gonna record Leonel's comments before we open to questions and answers, or shall we stop the recording now?
Oh, that would be interesting. Would like Lionel to give some of your thoughts, so that people later could.
Okay. Well, she says that we have to replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts, which is actually a kind of a cognitive behavioral approach to one's emotional state. She also stresses thinking a great deal. She doesn't seem to take into account feelings, which are just as important as thoughts. So I think she needs to have a few more conversations with Jung about this, because some of these negative thoughts are coming from the deep unconscious. They're coming from complexes that the individual actually has no control over. And that's why becoming conscious is so important. It's difficult to change a negative thought if it's being influenced by material in the unconscious that you have no control over. That's my main comment about what she said.
Can I just give you, that was my kind of fault. Yeah. Because Joanna de Angelis is she talks a lot about feelings and sensations.
She does. Oh,
but
okay.
Yeah, and it would be too long for this meeting. Yeah. So I kind of like, I knew we know each other very well, that you would comment on this, because, and I wanted to talk about the thoughts. We say in the Spiritist knowledge that thoughts have all this power in the sense that have are waves, right? And have all this energy, but they are colored kind of, we can use this image, by feelings and emotions. Yes. So Joanna talks about this too, but I brought only a part of the, her reasoning, because I really wanted to have this talk and this challenge, Lionel, because cognitive behavior therapies and meditation, mindfulness, for instance, is so important in the medical field nowadays, as you know, as a psychiatrist. And that's the way, for instance, meditation is able to get into the hospitals and the psychiatrist training. But they leave this part of that Lionel were talking about the feelings and emotions. Okay, so I will be bringing this later on when we talk about the complexes, because we have a different classes to talk about things. So I wanted to make this on purpose, Lionel. And I'm very glad that you talked about that and is reminding people about feelings and emotion, because there is everything to do with Jung's concept of the complexes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Joanna talks about that. But I wanted everybody to go little by little, because nowadays it seems that either we are, tormented, if we could say like that, about feelings of rage, or sometimes loving if people say thumbs up. Oh, I think it's so beautiful what you said, and I want to be your friend in the social media and all of that. But usually what we see in the social media, I know because people tell me, because I'm not in social media, but what people keep complaining, and our patients, that the rage in this debate and all this duality, and I have the reason, and you are, and people are my enemy that don't agree with me. It's kind of contaminating, everybody. So I think it's so nice that Lionel talks about that, because we have to go deeper. So it's not only the thoughts, not only the mental habits in this sense, but also the feelings and the emotions that overcome us sometimes. Sorry, Lionel, I just want to make this and say that it's her writings are very extent, so I wanted to go little by little. Go ahead, please.
I also think that you could unpack a little when she says that what we think becomes reality. That's not so easy to understand, but it seems to mean that our outer world seems to reflect our inner world. So, for example, if we have a lot of internal conflict and aggression, that we tend to evoke conflict and aggression in our relationships. But so what's going on outwardly reflects the way our mind is put together. I think that's what she meant by that. Otherwise, it's a bit hard to understand what she meant.
No, it was exactly that. And I really wanted you or other people to, but of course you to talk about that, because otherwise would be, like a determinism, if we could say that, oh, I have to pay a lot of attention to what I think, and people get stressed and anxious about that, right? Because it could come as a reality. It is a psychic reality, and we manifest in our behavior. That's what you're saying, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
But it's not. That's it. Some more comments to the general public, Lionel, before we.
Well, I just had one other comment, which is that she makes it sound as if the spiritual dimension is only good and loving. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge Jung's idea that the spiritual dimension has its negative aspects as well. That the divine has positive, loving aspects, but also there's an aspect of it that causes suffering as well. So I don't think we should say it's only positive. I don't know whether that's what she thinks, but that's what it sounded like from what you read.
Yeah, actually, again, this was just a part of her talking about this subject, but she talks a lot about this dark dimension. We talk a lot about this dark dimension in Spiritist knowledge. Not the ultimate, as you always say. We don't know what's the ultimate God. I mean, this cosmic intelligence or whatever people want to call, but about the dimension that we can relate to. then of course there is this dark side too. And we are going to be talk a lot about that when we talk about the shadow and collective shadow. But Lionel, I think it's very important when we talk about that, because Joanna doesn't stress so much this dark side. Okay. And this is your point of view is kind of new. So I think it's going to be very interesting when we get to the self and to the dark side of the self. Thank you. Some more comments, Lionel, to the general public?
No, I think I'd like to hear what other people wanted to say now.
Okay, so now I think we can stop sharing, recording.
Okay, just before we do that, Anahy, I just want you to elaborate a little bit more, because when you show the diagram, maybe my understanding or my reading is incorrect. I just want you to clarify that for me. Does Joanna say that the collective unconscious and the self is the same thing? Or they are two different concepts there?
Well, they are kind of, well, we are going to get, I didn't want to talk about the collective unconscious and the self, because there are many people that are watching us that don't have any idea about the collective unconscious and this. So I think we should, first have some clarification about the concepts, and then we can see what she says, what Jung says. Do you think it's okay for this? Are you going to be anxious until the next? I don't want to give spoilers.
Can I say something?
Who is talking?
It's Conrad.
Yes, please, if you don't mind being recorded. No problem.
I don't care. I don't care about that. Very good presentation. And being a medium from the spiritual center in Campinas, in England at the moment, something sent me into a trance for 2 minutes. That's why I sat down on another chair. Too short a time to say why. All it came out was good things about your presentation. Okay, good things. I can't say more than that because I don't know. It's important, as the first person said, is good and good sides and bad sides of the entire story. So it's important to understand that and pray for everyone, basically.
Thank you, Conrad. So I'm going to stop the record now so that we can move on to the questions and answer, if that's okay with everybody. So I will stop the record now.